All right. It's the Dead Man's Tome podcast with your host, Mr. Deadman, Becky, and SK. How's it going, guys?
Fine. How are you?
One more time.
One more time. One more time. And then you get that sweet weekend. Right?
No.
Yeah.
We have a show tomorrow.
Oh, man. A show tomorrow? And then
yes,
a show after
the release
that?
party.
Oh, okay.
And one Sunday.
Wait. What release party? What's being released?
Oh, did you not know? It's called Better You Believe, and it's by Tony Evans.
Better You
It's
Believe.
a wonderful collection. Yeah. It's a really, really, really good collection.
Who's this Tony Evans guy?
Well, he is this author that Dead Man's Tome picked up, and we're publishing his book.
Man, I'm surprised.
Hello. Collection
that's amazing.
It's a collection of short stories.
I'm back.
Hey, and look at that. We got our guest.
How about that?
We got our guest back.
Yay!
Right on time. That's good. And let me see if I get this. Because, see, I am horrible with names. Let me see if I get this. Let me see if I can land this. Okay, ready? Here we go.
Oh, wait, are we going to take bets?
Oh, yeah, take bets.
No.
No? Okay, ready?
No.
Steven.
Yay! No.
Spaghetti.
Yes. Yes.
Spaghetti.
Okay.
Yes.
I thought so.
You got it. No, it's spaghetti.
First try. You got it right. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. All right.
He slaughters names. He's horrible.
Yeah. At this point, it's just a thing. I'm sorry. Well, this could be a very exciting show. Mr. Spignesi, that's what I mean. You're a New York Times best-selling author. Have you interviewed Stephen King? I mean, I know you are like the most. Sounds like you are the most knowledgeable guy when it comes to Stephen King.
Well, I've been writing about him and studying his stuff since like 1984. My Encyclopedia came out in 90. But no, I've never interviewed him. He doesn't need to be bothered by me asking him questions. Because I focus primarily on the work.
Yeah.
And he has said a lot about his own writing, about his novels, his stories. So I've always been able to, when I wanted to have a comment by King relevant to a particular piece that I was writing about, I could almost always find some interview or some quote where he comments on it. Mm-hmm. And he's busy enough. He doesn't need to have guys like me interviewing him for asking questions that he's probably been asked 100 times. So no, I focus primarily on his body of work, and that's it. And you'll notice that the majority of my books, very little biographical stuff. I just don't find much interest in, as a matter of fact, a good friend of mine is thinking about writing a book about George R.R. Martin, and like a literary biography. And Mr. Martin said to him, why would anyone want to read about my life? I get up and I sit in a chair and I kind of totally understand that. When if you want to write about the body of work, oh, absolutely. I mean, Martin Scorsese's body of work is an incredible thing to write about, but his daily life, his biography, none of that has ever interested me, which doesn't mean that it's not interesting to many, many others. But for me, it's always, the artist's work has always been, primary for me. So I concentrate on what he's written.
It's not like most writers live a life of Hemingway or something. They don't. No,
they're not. And
most of them are fucking introverts, right? They don't want to talk to people.
A friend of mine who's a writer, he read I think it was a sports columnist, and somebody was asking him about, wow, you're a writer, and what's your life like? And he said, and this I don't remember the name, I apologize, but he said, I never forgot the quote though. He said, it's very easy. Writing equals ass plus chair.
Mhm.
That's true.
And I said, yeah, that's exactly. You sit down for hours, and that's what you do. And then if you end up with something that people enjoy and is compelling, and all the better. But the lives of writers are boring. They're not movie stars. The lives of actors and actresses, they get into all kinds of trouble and they do all kinds of stuff that's really kind of fun. Even musicians, like that new Elton John movie that's coming out. I'm reading a bunch of Elton John biographies now because that's my next book. I'm doing a book on Elton that's coming out at the end of this year. And
Cool.
good heavens, what he did in his life. It was a suicide attempt, and the drugs, and the coming out, and the decadence, and you rarely hear about writers trashing hotel rooms, right?
Yeah, most of them can't afford a hotel room.
Or the damage that they would do. That's right. You're right.
That's true. That's so true. Oh man. But it's that wanting to know the dirt on people. I think that's what drives him about that a little bit. There's a little bit of grime to it. It's kind of like the tabloid thing. Oh, what is the dark secret life of Stephen King? It's like, ooh, I don't know. But yeah.
Apparently he goes for walks and gets hit by trucks.
Yep.
Boy, imagine that. Yeah, that 1999, Brian Smith. Yeah. And Brian Smith died of an OD on King's birthday, which,
wow.
oh yeah. And that became a whole big, he died on King's birthday, and, King, he almost killed King. And so there's always, there will always be people who will look for, like you were just describing, like kind of like a salacious angle, or some kind of weird angle, the secret life. The secret life is, getting up and going to work. I mean, it really is a job. And I teach courses on writing and do lectures on writing, as well as writing my own books. And, a lot of writers, wannabe writers or aspiring writers or unpublished writers, many of them don't get into the daily habit, which I always try and recommend. You got to get up and you got to write every day for however long you can. I mean, King sets his sights on 1,500 words a day, which is like, 2 single-spaced 12-point pages. Or like 4 or 5 double-spaced pages. And he doesn't stop. He'll go more than that, he has said, but he tries not to stop unless he's hit that goal and if you do that, if you just do the math, 1,500 words a day times 360 or whatever you're going to write in a year, no wonder he can turn out, The Outsider and Elevation in a given year. Because he's turning out material. Now, of course, that begs the question, well, where does that creativity come from? Where does that, but when you're a talented artist, usually the ideas are plentiful. And I think King, with his prolific nature, good heavens, I mean, look at the way this guy turns out books, and you can't wait for inspiration. You got to treat it like a job. And what that does is kind of trains your brain. When you sit down, whatever, the legal pad, the typewriter, or the computer, your brain is in the zone where anything that is, you were working on, hopefully it'll do it. And I'm sure you guys have heard writers say, the book wrote itself, or the characters ended up doing something I never expected.
Yeah.
And, non-artists look at that and say, what are you, schizo? How could that be where you're creating these characters, you're writing their dialogue, you're making them, but when you're writing, it is a type of self-hypnosis. It's kind of like, it is. It's King has described it. It's self-hypnosis.
It's a guided hallucination.
Exactly. That's exactly right. And the process, we can train ourselves to flick that switch and turn it on and off at will. Now, of course, ideas will come flying at you if you're an artist, and you're going to keep a notebook and you're going to make ideas, you're going to write them down. And, even if it's an image, a girl jumps into a pool and surfaces in the middle of the ocean. And then you just write that down and then put it aside. And then maybe later that'll turn into something, or maybe it won't. But the whole point of the creative process is to be constantly, on red alert, with your antenna up. And I interviewed Jerry Williamson. He was a horror writer known as J.N. Williamson. And I interviewed him for my King Encyclopedia. And I said to him, what do you think about Stephen King? I mean, has he influenced you? Has he influenced other writers that you know of? And he said, well, how could he not? He said, and the reason is that King is a noticer.
Yeah.
I mean, he notices the littlest movements and things and thought processes, and he's able to create really vivid characters because of things that he has noticed. He said his antenna's always up. And I always love that image, because it really does describe the entire writing process, especially fiction. Nonfiction, I mean, I've done, I don't know, close to 70 books, and I've written one novel. And the rest are all nonfiction, which are all research-driven.
Yeah.
That's a whole different process than writing fiction. And, and King has it nailed. And I don't think it's a coincidence that he hasn't done any book-length nonfiction other than like On Writing, Danse Macabre, Faithful.
Yeah.
I think Nightmares in the Sky, he wrote a lengthy intro, but he's a fiction. He's a storyteller.
He is.
And
He
so,
definitely is. Good one at that too.
Yeah, and he's got it. He is indeed.
I remember reading Danse Macabre as well. It was kind of by accident. I mean, I was a little kid at the time going through. My mom had a bunch of his books, like in a brown bag, like a brown bag special, whatever, a big one. She had like Dinner, Firestarter, Christine. So I was like, okay. Pet Cemetery. I was like, okay. And then the Danse Macabre. I remember the cover. It just looked freaky. So I was reading that too. I don't remember much about it, but I remember like reading it. I was like, oh.
Well, it was an overview of horror in all media as of time: books, movies, TV shows,
Everything.
And the thing is, I for one have always hoped the day might come where he'd like a break from fiction and he would write volume 2 or write the
Right.
So much has happened since he wrote that book in horror, and dark literature and fantasy, that I mean, a chapter by King on Game of Thrones would be awesome. It would just be fantastic. But he doesn't seem to have much interest in doing an updated edition.
That's interesting. I wonder why.
How old is he now?
Well, he was born in 1947, so he is 71. Well, he'll be 71 in September.
Interesting. Maybe that's why he doesn't want to do another one.
Maybe.
A lot of people thought he was going to retire after the accident. Yeah. But he has been as prolific. I mean, he came out with the Expanded on Writing and Dreamcatcher right after the accident, within a year or so, and then he continued from there. But for a couple of interviews that he did, he said, that I may be done. And Entertainment Weekly, I don't know, do you guys remember the issue where they had him on the cover and it says Stephen King retires? Yeah,
I read that.
And then next year, the following 6 months, he had a brand new book out. I mean, it was just really misleading. But I don't know. I don't really think his age makes a difference. I think he's
Does not.
he's gonna write until he can't. And he often says, I've never written a word for a nickel. I've never thought of the money when I started a project. And I often say to writers, I said, look at what someone like Stephen King is worth. Yet he works every day. Why do you think that is so? And they just look at me, and I say, it's because it's his calling. He's not doing it.
It's part of him.
For the money. Exactly. It's an avocation. He's not doing it for the money. I said, and when you can reach a point where you don't think about, what advance could I get for this, or how many copies could we sell in the first, and instead just focus on the art, on the creation of this whatever novel, short story, novella that'll just blow people away, then it comes. The old saying, I'm going to claim it's Italian, but I don't think it is.
Italians claiming things, huh?
I'm going to claim this for Italy and for Italians, but there's a saying, and I actually have heard it in Italian, but it boils down to, when you love your work, it's not work. And that's exactly right, especially when it comes to the creative arts.
Yeah.
The problem, though, is if you're an indie author, you can't ignore the money. You can't ignore the marketing. You have to have all these different hats. You're an accountant. You're a marketer. You're a PR agent.
But
you got to do all the things. Yes.
The secret is after the fact. See, when I do those writing talks that I was mentioning, I tell writers, you got to have two heads. You got to be the artist and you got to be the marketer. And the thing is, when do you change hats? When the work is done. If you go into writing something thinking about money, it'll stymie you. It really will. I agree. I agree with that. But you're completely right. I mean, if you're an indie author, you got to watch everything and become like you said, the accountant and the marketer and the advertiser and the promoter, doing the interviews and so forth. But that's got to come after the creative process. Yeah. Where you say, I have this. Here's the book. To the industry, books are merchandise, and merchandise has to sell. Yeah. And yes, you can be I'm the artist. I want to create a work of art. I want to create this brilliant work that's going to move people, and it's just going to be an incredible thing. But the bookstores will it sell? Will it sell? Yeah, Amazon, Barnes and Noble, any of the websites are going to say, well, can we sell this book? Their merchandise. If they can't move the merchandise, and you guys know the industry is struggling. 90% of the books published don't make any money. Yeah, it really is an act of love, a work. It's a love of the process, and it's a love of reading that makes writers and people in the industry move into the industry. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, it's a very tough industry right now. It's a lot of competition out there, and what SK said was right too. I mean, you have to balance a lot more. I mean, you have to not just not just two hats, but multiple hats. I mean, it's when King started. I mean, it was like you get into a traditional publisher, and what they help you out with that. It seemed like they would help you out with the tasks that you would have to do on your own today. I mean, is that fair enough to say? I mean, would you agree that things are a lot harder now than they were back then? Or
well, the thing is that there's only 5 publishers now, it seems, and hundreds and hundreds of different imprints. Funny story. I've written 9 or 10 books for Penguin over the years, and my first novel was published by Random House, and now they're one company. Penguin Random House. And I said to my agent, I said, what does that mean? If a proposal for a nonfiction book or even a novel gets rejected by a Penguin editor, does that mean it's also rejected by every Random House editor? And he said, no. He said, I submit to everybody. He said, because the guy in this cubicle at Penguin doesn't know what the guy in that cubicle in Random House has rejected or has seen. And, you know, he has sold projects of mine 10 years after I had given up on them. And said, oh, yeah, we've gotten too many rejections on this book. And then he hears that a new editor has come into the fold at Penguin. He writes and introduces himself and says, listen, I've got this proposal from these authors. What would you like to see? And it turns out that one of them was exactly, and it was 10 years after I had written the proposal. It was a book about the America's presidents. And it had gotten rejected multiple times at Penguin and elsewhere. And then it finally sold to a new editor who was looking exactly for that type of material. So yes, you are right. It's much more difficult now. And the thing is too, most publishers and most editors don't want to see unagented submissions. So, without an agent today.
So an unsolicited manuscript is like dead in the water.
Actually, editor friends of mine have told me that many houses now have a rubber stamp that says returned unopened and unread. If they get in what is obviously a manuscript, like a big padded envelope from somebody they don't know that wasn't solicited, and they just return to sender, because you need unagented submissions are, yeah, you said it. There are many cases they are just impossible to even get a read. The old days of the slush pile, they still exist. And occasionally you'll hear about an editor who will take a limited amount of direct submissions, but none of them want to see the manuscript right off the bat. They want a query letter or a concept email. And then they'll say, oh, well, that sounds like something I might be interested in. Let me see the whole thing. But to just send in a manuscript unsolicited, the entire manuscript, I know 100 editors, and they don't even get to read at work. They got to bring all this stuff home, you know, because
who wants to do that?
I know, and they work at night reading manuscripts. Now, let's face it, the majority of manuscripts, they're not going to read the entire thing. They're going to know by chapter 2 if this works, and then you know, they'll go from there. But the bulk of them, you know, have bring home a stack of manuscripts that they've actually said, okay, send it to me, let me see it. And so whenever that happens with me, you know, my agent will tell me, you know, oh, so-and-so wanted to see this novel or this manuscript. And then I just put it out of my mind for like 6 weeks. Because for an editor to commit to reading an entire manuscript on request, it takes time. They're really swarmed these days with material, and that's why a lot of writers have turned to self-publishing. You know, because they want their book in print, and you know, with Amazon and CreateSpace and all that stuff, you can get a book in print and have it being sold on Amazon. But the majority of self-published books sell less than 250 copies. So, you know, and also many of them go from writer to reader without that filter of the editor in between. So when I do those talks and people come up to me and they say, you know, I've written a book. Okay, what is it? It's a novel. Okay, I want to publish it on Amazon. I said, okay. Have you hired an editor, a freelance editor, to go through the manuscript and make sure that it's perfect? And they say, well, no, I proofread it and I did the line editing. And I said, okay.
Yeah, no.
And we know what happens when that happens. You know, it's very often you get a book and it's riddled with misspellings and typos and so forth. So yes, to confirm what you just said, it is much more difficult these days.
Oh yeah,
than when King started too. Yeah.
On the upside, you don't have to risk, rejection if you publish it yourself.
Well, rejection.
Well, you do
You could've-
when people leave shit reviews because you didn't do what you were supposed to do.
Or even
Well,
worse,
that's a
Becky.
different kind of rejection.
Even worse, no
It's
one
a
even
different
buys it.
rejection.
No one even buys it. You know.
That's the thing. You got to be a more and a lot of self-published authors, they're very excited to find that Amazon page with their book on it is a wonderful experience, and they'll send the book to friends and family marketing campaign for something when you work full time.
Yeah.
And have a life. It's very difficult to suddenly become like an ad guy or woman and start trying to, post on Facebook and write articles and, even being
I hear
published.
that so often.
Even today, trade publishers are not promoting anywhere near. When my first novel came out in 2005, Random House published it. They ran quarter-page ads for the book in Atlantic and Harper's on them. And today, spending ad dollars on unless you're Stephen King or John Grisham or James Patterson or Anne Rice. I mean, Joyce Carol Oates, they'll put ads for her, but I mean, it's just almost impossible in a major medium. So they use social media, and we all know, what kind of response that'll get.
It's hit and miss. It's definitely a hit and miss response. It depends on how you. It depends on how you use your social media. If you're aware of hashtags, aware of certain trends, and have certain angles, but you have to just constantly grind on it. You have to be very active and
You
aware.
have to hit the right demographic too.
Yeah. It's like
you got to target the reader that you wrote the book for.
Yeah.
And this is often a problem with writers who are submitting to regular publishers. I always I told my students and I told writers, I say, what's the worst answer you can give when an editor asks you people who only buy cookbooks are going to want it? And it doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
So you got to have that, like, Rebecca just said, you got to have that targeted demographic. And if you've written a sci-fi novel, who's your market? Sci-fi readers, not historical readers or cookbook buyers or military buyers or books about musical biographies. And I say that's the reason bookstores have departments.
That is. Yeah.
Right.
Psychology and cooking and sexuality and sci-fi and mystery, and so you got to really be able to identify the genre of your book, and then target people who buy those books.
That's
and let's
right.
face it, Facebook with all the Facebook groups. That, for instance, you guys know or watch Downton Abbey. You familiar with that? Yeah,
Yes.
I'm a huge fan.
I've never seen an episode.
It's brilliant, and I may be doing a book about it. But the thing is, there are Downton Abbey Facebook groups where the level of interest and fascination and fanaticism with the show is intense.
Wow.
Now, if I did a book, I would talk about it on those groups, and the odds are it would result in some sales.
Yeah.
But if I went onto a Star Trek Facebook group with a Downton Abbey book, not going to happen.
You might get banned from the group. That might throw you out.
Thank you.
You can't plug this here.
You're absolutely right.
Off topic. You're advertising your own stuff. What are you doing here?
Yep. That's right. Yeah.
So, I mean, being that the industry has changed so much, I mean, and you've given some advice so far. I mean, do you have any other advice you would give to new and aspiring writers?
Yeah, get an agent, and that's a big part.
That's a lot in a few words. Get an agent.
But here, there's a trick. There's a way of doing it. it's harder to get an agent than an editor these days, a publisher. However, and this is a big part of this writing symposium that I do at libraries and schools around the area in Connecticut, publishersmarketplace.com. That website is an industry website. And would you believe that it offers connections and links to agents looking for clients, which is a godsend.
Mhm.
And on the right side of the homepage, it says agents, and it lists 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 agents who are actively looking for new writing clients, and they tell you exactly how they want to be pitched. I only look at emailed queries. I only look at the first 5 chapters. I only accept submissions through snail mail, etc. But the point is, they also tell you, I am looking for political humor, modern politics, economics, history, and pop culture. And so you can know right off the bat, if you're doing nonfiction, whether or not your book qualifies for them pursuing it. If you're doing fiction, I am buying or I am looking for writers who are doing children's books, romance novels, Western novels, sci-fi novels, etc. And so you can go through this list and make a list of potential agents and then pitch each one. I personally know writers who have gotten an agent using this procedure. And it's really a blessing to have a list of all these professional literary agents who are actively pursuing new clients. So that would be my first big piece of advice. Do everything in your power to get an agent, because that will make your life easier and it'll improve your odds of getting your stuff reviewed by professional editors in traditional publishing companies, which is what you want, what every writer wants.
Okay. And I'm checking out the website right now, publishersmarketplace.com. And it looks like you have to register.
No. Look on the homepage and look at the right part of the page section. Lists
Susan Ginsburg, Danny Conaway. Okay.
Yeah, these are people looking, and you don't have to be a member of Publishers Market. You can join them. There's a annual fee, which gives you even more insider information and all kinds of stuff, a daily newsletter and so. But that's free there.
That is pretty cool. I'm glad I figured that out. I'm glad I found that, because I don't want any listeners to be like, oh man, he's just trying to show a site for money. It's like no. You don't even have to pay for it. I mean, you get more. But you also have you can get right here on the side. Look, if I wanted to, I can click on Susan Ginsburg or Stacey Testa.
Right, and then she tells you what she buys, what she acquires, how she wants to be submitted to, and it's a real godsend for writers who have a work but don't know where to go with it from there. Because if you it's like, what do? You cold call agents that you find in a phone book. I mean, you got to do it professionally, and this allows you to make professional contacts with professional literary agents, and it's been very useful for a lot of friends of mine who have been looking for agents. And my agent has been scaling down. When I started with him in '84, he had dozens and dozens and dozens of clients, but now, he's kind of semi-retired. He has like a boutique agency, and he just has like, maybe 20, 25 clients. The ones, and this is critical, the ones that make money. You get a percentage of what you earn, but, you don't want to have to put up money. That's just not really something that you want to get into.
That's another thing.
It's like paying to publish.
Exactly, because most agents, the agents that have the connections and know the editors and have been in the system for years, they can get right through to editors, and they're not going to charge you for that. If they believe in a book, they're going to represent it to the best of their ability. They're going to go to these editors that they know will be interested in something like what you've done. And then if you earn money, they earn money.
Okay.
But, you know,
so
if they say I want $500 or $1,000 up front for me to represent you, you walk away from that.
okay,
Right.
that's good to know.
Run.
That's good to hear. Because there's a lot of people who say they're agents, but they could be, it sounds like they're leeching, they're taking advantage. So, and I know
The old school agents are what you want, where they pay for everything. It's kind of like lawyers who work strictly on contingency and you don't pay a penny for whatever lawsuit that you're filing. The analogy is the same. Some lawyers will want a retainer, but on cases where they're suing for damages, majority of reputable lawyers will say, well, no, if we win, I get paid. In the meantime, it won't cost you anything. And that's kind of like the philosophy that is dominant in terms of looking for a reputable agent.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'm thinking people who win lawsuits still, but they, I mean, even when they lose lawsuits, they still have to pay their attorney. I mean, I guess
out of the damages. I've been involved in lawsuits where the lawyer gets a third of what you get. And one of my lawyers, I was involved in a lawsuit, and I didn't pay a nickel, not a nickel in a retainer. He said, no, I'll handle everything, and whatever we get, and we got a nice amount. It was a damages lawsuit, and he got a third, which he discounted to 25% when we had the closing or whatever you want to call it. That's the dynamic that I'm talking about when it comes to literary agencies. The majority of reputable agencies will take you on because they believe in you and the work, and they will represent you to editors. And don't get me wrong, they may drop you too.
Yeah.
If they pitch 20 editors and get 20 rejections, they're going to walk away and say, listen, you're going to have to look for someone else because I just can't sell this, even though I believe it's marketable. And that happens all the time. I mean, it's tough. The number of submissions compared to the number of books published.
Now, and this is for novels. What about for like short stories?
No market other than literary magazines and the occasional online publication, but they don't pay. There are short story collections, but for an unknown or unpublished writer to sell a short story collection, unless every story is like an award winner or has been in a literary journal, they're going to pass because nobody buys short stories collections unless they're by Stephen King.
So, with that said, being that Tony Evans' new short story collection, it's been selling a few copies, been getting some page reads, been published by Dead Man's Tome. That says something. But
I often try to tell people who write short stories, that's great. I mean, do a collection, self-publish it if you really want it. Try and submit to literary magazines or online magazines that publish short stories. But there's got to be one story in that collection of yours that could be expanded to a novel. I mean, novels are being published today at 45,000 words. Short stories are, 10 to 40,000 words. So clearly, if you really got engaged in the story, you can hopefully expand it and sell it, as a 50,000 word short novel. So that's what I always suggest. I mean, it's the writer's decision whether or not a story is perfect as is, or there is opportunity in it to expand it to something full length, which would be great. But that's the only way to really, market short stories but people like writing them, so it's just that there's very little market for them. And, the funny thing, Esquire, Playboy, New Yorker, Harper's, Atlantic, Good Housekeeping, Red Book, Some of them publish short stories. New Yorker tries to on almost a monthly basis. But the thing is, Playboy, if they publish one short story a month, that's 12 stories a year.
Yeah.
That they buy. And of course, if you look at the issues of Playboy that have short stories in them, who are the authors? Stephen King and John Grisham and James the big names, the huge names. So short stories is a tough market.
Now we have a question in the chat for you.
Yes.
Are short novels better than the longer ones?
Well, first of all, the question is, the answer is, in terms of selling them, publishers really don't make that a big priority. I mean, a short novel like Bridges in Madison County was short, and it was a massive bestseller. And yet, the Game of Thrones novels are massive, and they're massive bestsellers. So the editors really kind of look at, does the author tell the story he or she wanted to tell in the size of this manuscript, or does it seem too short or too long? It really is an individual decision process based on whether or not the writer did the job they're supposed to do. Editors can tell if the book is lacking in terms of heft. If the story needs more, they'll know. So trying to shape. All right. Before I go on, the answer to the question is no. It's not easier to sell a short novel versus a long novel, because each novel is evaluated on an individual basis, and then the publisher design the book and price it based on the size of the ultimate book. They're just really looking for great books, regardless of length.
From a manufacturing standpoint, does it cost them much more to do 800 pages versus 200 pages?
It costs more. But
obviously it's more, but is it a significant?
But it's not that. No,
it's not 4 times as much.
No, it's not huge. Yeah. In fact, I just saw a royalty statement for one of my books. My book was 476 pages, I think. And the net cost was like $6 or $7 a book, and they were selling it for like 18, half of which goes to the seller and half to the publisher. So, when you print thousands of books, the price point drops considerably. So you rarely will see an editor say, of a 1,000-page book, oh my God, it'll cost us too much to print it. If this book is a killer and everybody at the publishing company is engaged by it and it's just got buzz and every editor is talking about it, it could be 2,000 pages. They may split it into 2 volumes like Quentin did with Kill Bill, where they say, it's a 4-hour movie. We're not going to do a 4-hour movie. They may say, well, it's a 1,500-page book. We're not going to do 50. We'll do 750 and 750, volume 1, volume 2. And those are decisions that are made all the time. But again, it all boils down to the book. It's the book that the editors look at and design a particular plan for that book. So it's I always say, it's tough to break into publishing. It really is. But every editor I've ever known has always been looking for a new voice. And so unpublished writers don't have the odds aren't against unpublished writers if the work is really quite something. Unpublished writers come out of the woods every day with works that just blow people away, and they get a big advance for their first book, and then book number 2, the sophomore effort, sometimes does well, sometimes tanks. So
now I heard that advances are not as generous as they once were.
They're horrible. Advances. I'll give you an example. I have a friend who sold a novel to Random House, like
Okay.
I did, and he got a $75,000 advance, and this was like 15 years ago.
Yeah.
Today, a very similar book would probably get offered 5 to 15,000.
Wow.
Yeah. Advances have really shrunk. In fact, this started around 05, 06, 07. I had been writing full time from like 1987 through 04, 05. And I was doing 3 books a year. And it was a very,
Okay.
yeah, it was really active. That's how I was able to get 55, 60 books under my belt before I kind of took a break. And in 06, my advances had shrunk, royalties had shrunk, rejections had gone up, and suddenly for 10 years, and I did like maybe 1 book a year. And then I retired from teaching like in 2016, and now I'm back to writing full time again, but I'm retired, so it's not a question of having to earn a living just on writing. So yes, things have changed, and the conglomeration of all of these publishing companies into, bigger and bigger entertainment conglomerates rather than individual publishing companies has also made the bottom line much more important than it used to be. I mean, it was always important. I mean, I don't want to dismiss the importance of a profit loss and all that costs for getting a book out, but now a book imprint is part of the entertainment division of a lot of these big major huge companies like Macmillan and Random House and Universal and all these other companies. So yeah, it's much more difficult now. And let's face it, a big part of it is that people aren't reading as much as they used to.
Yeah.
That's when it's funny when I was in high school, back in the dark ages, my English teacher would always ask, "How many read for pleasure?" And 22 out of 25 hands would go up. And we were reading Isaac Asimov and Robert Heinlein and Tolkien. We were reading Tolkien, Lord of the Rings and all that. Now, when I taught freshmen, college freshmen for 10 years, and I would always ask, how many here, I'd have 25 students per class, and I'd always ask, how many read for pleasure? If I got 3 hands up, it was a lot.
Wow.
Yeah, I'm not kidding. And this was consistent every single semester. This was consistent. How many read for pleasure? 2 hands, 3 hands, sometimes 4 hands out of 25 students. And I mean, that's a stark indicator of how video games and the internet and everything has changed. So now, people are looking at screens and there's always a book buying audience. There's always people who read, but it's a smaller percentage of the entertainment dollar.
Yeah, it
in
really
America
is.
these days. It really is. And if you look at the pyramid with movies at the top, and then sports, and then music, and then TV, books are at the bottom. And
movies aren't even at the top of the pyramid anymore.
The video games are. Video games. Yeah.
Video games?
Yeah,
Wow.
they took over.
Yeah. So, and with publishing at the bottom, that just means fewer dollars are expended on buying projects from writers. Fewer dollars are expended in promoting books, and it's a smaller. I mean, you guys are all readers, but it's a smaller and smaller community now.
Yeah.
But
It is very small.
You're right, but you can't give up. I tell people all the time, don't be discouraged by the odds. Just keep moving forward, keep working, keep writing, and you never know what's going to happen. I mean, Stephen King, going back to King, I mean, he was Tabitha was working at Dunkin' Donuts, and he was teaching in high school English for $6,400 a year, and writing in the furnace room of his double wide trailer, and selling short stories to men's magazines to get extra money, and then Carrie sold, and that was it. And in fact, he threw Carrie away. He had started it as a short story, and then said, "No, I think it could be bigger." But then he gave up. He threw it away, and Tabitha found the pages in the pail. You've probably heard that story.
Yeah, I have.
And read them and said, "Oh no, you got to finish this, and you got to turn it into a novel." And Rosemary's Baby had come out, and Ira Levin, and it was just the right time for the right book. And that gave it, the paperback rights gave him enough to quit teaching and write full time. And then Salem's Lot came out, and he was on the path. Yeah.
Man,
my dad wrote a novel back in the 80s, and he ended up going with a vanity press and printing off a few hundred copies that he handed out to people, and it's really not very good, I gotta say. But and I would, I remember talking to one of my brothers about the book, and it was like kind of down on the book, and he goes, "Yeah, well, how many have you written?"
Yes.
And there's something to that, and well, now I do have a book out, and whether, maybe I sell 100 copies of that book, but it's there.
It exists.
It exists, and it's got my name on it.
It's easy to dismiss people who aren't big financial successes. It's very easy. Even bands, local bands who never become the Beatles, but still they do gigs in clubs, and maybe they'll record a CD if they come up with the money and so forth. And some people will say to them, "Oh, they'll never be anything. These guys, they got to work day jobs."
Yeah, but some of these bands are great, man. Some of the local bands, man.
How many songs? Right? How many songs have you written? How many clubs have you played in?
Yeah,
how many CDs have you released? So again, it all comes back to love of the art. I mean, if you're an artist, you're going to create art.
And I noticed you said Beatles. I noticed.
Well,
I noticed you're a Beatles fan.
Yeah, I've written 4 books about the Beatles. I'm a huge fan.
Cow.
4 books, only 4, huh? Only 4?
Yeah. Well, actually, we're working on number 5. So yeah, I'm a big Beatles fan. I think that they were a once in a generation achievement. 4 geniuses who came together at the right time. I interviewed Richard Matheson, the author, for my Stephen King Encyclopedia back in 88, 89. And I said to him, we were talking about Stephen King and the influences on him. Matheson was a huge influence on King. King has always acknowledged that. And he said, well, Stephen King, right writer, right time. He said, we can't dismiss the significance of timing when it comes to success in the arts. He said, if the Beatles had come around in the 30s or 40s, would they have achieved anywhere near the success that they did in the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s throughout? And he said, I don't think so. He said they were the right band, the right artists, the right creators at the right time. And the thing is, we can never know what the right time is. So the answer is just do your thing. Right. Create what you're going to create and take it from there, because you may change history. I mean, Kurt Cobain did, right?
He did.
Bowie did, and the Beatles did. I mean, their influence.
Oh, yeah.
As part, I mean, fashion, video. They were the first people to do music videos. You can see them, Strawberry Fields, Strawberry Fields, all the other stuff that they did. They were the first, and then MTV.
They're great.
You think
They're
they
great.
weren't influenced, right? By the fact that the Beatles had done little music movies or whatever they called them at the time, and then they created an entire channel just showing those, and every musician had to do one. So
Right.
you know,
and
you
now
just
this day, even music videos is like, what are you? It's like how MTV had become like something else other than music videos, because it's like, what are you guys doing now? What are you guys doing now?
Yeah, that's very true. You can't. Where do you get music videos these days?
YouTube.
YouTube. Yeah, you're right. They release them on YouTube and get 10 million views in 8 hours, right?
Mm-hmm. You see Nicki Minaj shake her ass for a little while, and then whatever you're watching. Yeah.
Right.
So I'm sure you've written about this, but what are the fucking odds of 3 teenage kids in one small town coming together and all of them having this incredible musical talent, just latent, really, when they first met?
Right. I know. I mean, the odds are insane. And it's really kind of gratifying that they were able to recognize the genius in each other and put together this thing. You know, the sum of the parts was greater than the individual parts. I mean, John was a really rough beauty, a rough diamond. Paul could be overly sentimental and Swedish, not Swedish, but sweet. George, you know, on his own, he did many songs that are memorable, but his solo work never achieved, in my opinion, his work with the Beatles. And Ringo has influenced an entire generation of drummers, but you put them all together, and Paul was like kind of like this damper or this kind of control on John. John gave Paul examples of how to have an edge. George was influenced and inspired by Lennon and McCartney, two of the greatest songwriters, you know, in the past 100 years, and turned out things like Guitar and Something, and you know, the stuff that now are his recognizable stuff from the Beatles. So yeah, you're absolutely right. The odds are unimaginable. By the way, a funny story, you know, Frank Sinatra once said that Something was his favorite Lennon McCartney song. I don't think anyone corrected him either.
You know, all this talk about the Beatles, but we all know who the king of rock and roll is. There's only one.
Lord, there you go.
Oh, Elvis, yeah, he was just magnificent. He was, great. Yeah, I mean, can you hear the sarcasm? I hope.
No, not at all.
I hear it,
no,
but
don't get me wrong.
I hear it, but it doesn't
Elvis,
change the fact that
Elvis
who's king? Who's king?
Elvis influenced music. Elvis influenced the Beatles.
The Beatles, yeah.
Yeah. So, but the thing, my personal artistic tastes are that I put second tier singers. I'm a singer-songwriter. I had a piano vocal act. I was in bands when I was young, and I'm working on a CD. And the thing is, it's the writing that I always go back to. And to have a singer be handed a song that someone else wrote, you know, and sing it and do very well with it is great. It's the process in America. But the singer-songwriters, like, I'll take Neil Young any day over some guy who just has an entire album of songs where the songwriter under each song is different. So that's just me personally. But yeah, I would never diss Elvis. I mean, he influenced the Beatles. They met. He was an icon. And so, of course, you know, it's just that my personal taste tends to be for singer-songwriters, male or female.
He's an icon.
He's an icon,
sing.
yeah.
He can kind of play the guitar. kind of.
He can use it as a prop.
But he did.
Actually, did he ever write? I don't know.
I don't really know.
I don't think so.
I don't think so. I don't think so either.
Mm-mm.
But he did serve in the military. Damn it, he served in the military. He put his.
Yeah, he did that.
Well, hey, John Lennon was in How I Won the War.
Well, I mean, I don't know if that's the same thing, but
We have another question in the chat.
Yes.
Are writers doing more screenplay writing these days to get into the next Netflix playlist?
God.
I know more and more writers who are working on screenplays. And I've written 4 and haven't sold one of them. It's more difficult to get a deal on a screenplay than to get a deal for a book. So, yes, and Netflix, the thing is, they are such an elite category of creative artists and production companies. They get offered the best of the best. And Hollywood has a network just like every other industry. And so if the guy who wrote a movie 10 years ago that did very well has an idea for a drama series, a crime series, his agent is going to Netflix, and this guy's going to have credibility. He's going to have a track record, and that's what's going to get looked at. It's not a coincidence that, Showtime, Netflix, even Amazon, when they buy a project and they announce it, and then they tell you what the artist, the producer, the director, the writer has done previously, you say, wow, that's pretty serious, So, yeah, a lot of writers are writing screenplays. But again, you need an agent because production companies will not look at unagented submissions. And you got to be in that network in order to, get any kind of interest. In fact, one way in to answer the question that, in the chat, a lot of writers are getting movie deals based on their novels.
That's true.
Right.
Yeah, that's a way in to Netflix and to Hollywood and so forth. Get your novel optioned.
There's even been self-published books have been turned into novels, but
yes,
they get.
There has. In fact, that Matt Damon movie,
The Martian.
The Martian movie, yeah, that was. I believe it was self-published.
It was
on the internet, and the guy got a book deal and a movie deal. He published 1 chapter a week, I think, on a website. But the thing is, here we go again with quality. The book is so good that it was clearly something that anyone with any eye for something that is compelling and that could be really done well is going to pick up on. Because these companies, publishers, production companies, they have people who browse the internet and look at self-published stuff, who look at websites that publish individual chapters of novels and so forth. And so, yeah, it's rare, but it happens. So, yes, if a writer has a novel, then, trying to get it optioned is something else the agent can try. Or if they have an idea for a screenplay, sure, you could write an original screenplay. But that kind of really does limit your access to people who might be willing to buy it. But a book, even if you get, and the thing with the book, even if you get it optioned, they own it for a year. And they have a year to put together a director, a cast, the funding, etc. And then if they don't, then it comes back to you, but you keep the money. You keep the option money.
Yeah.
So that's been a road that some people I know. I have a friend who's a sci-fi writer. He's written dozens of science fiction novels, and he's got like 20 of them optioned at any one time. So yeah, that's one route that's available as well.
Would you agree that screenwriting is the hardest writing there is?
Well, yeah. Actually, I'll refine that a bit. Screen adaptations.
Oh, even that, yeah.
Oh, God.
Taking a novel and turning it into a script. A script is 1 page equals 1 minute of screen time, and there can be no interior monologuing, as there is in a novel, because basically, if you can't see it or hear it, it doesn't exist in a movie. So Stephen King once described the process as taking a book and shoving it through a funnel. And he's right, because you got 120 pages, the bulk of which is white space and dialogue. Stage directions are simply for movement and what the characters do. So you can't say Cynthia was worried in the stage directions, because you have to say
you can't see worried.
Thank you. You got to say something like, the expression on Cynthia's face shows she is crestfallen or something, so the actor knows what you're wanting them to do. So adaptation is very difficult. Actually, I just finished an adaptation of a nonfiction memoir that is now being shopped, and it was not easy. To end up with 110, 120 pages from a 300-page memoir that had a lot of interior musings and monologuing and, that kind of thing. So, but screenplay writing, it's almost a tad easier because you're not constricted by the book. If the book doesn't exist and you're writing a script from scratch, then basically you're telling the story the way you want to tell the story, and you have to do it in 3 acts and 120 pages. So I would say that screenplay adapting is the most difficult, and then screenplay writing is also very difficult. You have a lot more, you got a lot more leeway, a lot more room to play with books, because they can be 600 pages, they could be 400 pages. You can go back and take stuff out, put it back in. And with scripts, everything has to be on the screen, and that's difficult to do.
And you can't just take the internal dialogue and turn it into like a narration, because
it's funny you say that, because for a long time, voiceover was considered a no-no. In Hollywood, scripts that had, and I talked to a couple of script doctors and stuff, and they said, producers, directors, they don't want to see voiceover in the script because that's a cheat on exposition. Instead of showing something, you're telling them. And of course, the rule is show, don't tell when you're telling a story, when you're narrating something, right? And so, but now it seems like every movie has just endless voiceover telling you what's going on. And she didn't believe that this would happen, but the next thing she knew, she was back in her hometown. And then you see her on Main Street in her hometown, And so it's kind of changed a bit.
Yeah, and that exposition is annoying too. It is.
It really is.
It is.
If I start playing a movie and I hear a narrator come on, I'm out. I leave right then.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Huh.
It has to be a real good voice. I mean, as a really soothing voice. I don't know.
You take something like Dexter. Now, and I asked one of my mentors about, why does it work with Dexter? And he said, well, it's more of an internal dialogue than a narration. It's him talking to himself.
Well, I think an even simpler answer is that it works because it's written right.
Yeah.
When narration, Forrest Gump, right, had a lot of voiceover. And when it's done right, it works. When it's done as a cheat, where you're hearing something where you just you just said you walk out, when you hear something that could easily have been shown, it can really stop you in your tracks in terms of the artistic appreciation of the work. You look at it and say, really, you're telling me this? I can see it happening, or that kind of thing. And with Dexter, that was kind of like when Dexter started, that was kind of like the era when voiceover, artistic voiceover, and your mentor is right. And, you know, when it becomes an interior monologue that works, which actually, and what that means is shows the motivation of the character, or explains the illustrates the motivation of the character. That's great. People enjoy that, and it works artistically. But when it's purely just to fill pages, you know, it doesn't. Yeah.
Yeah,
I guess
that's true. That's true. With Dexter, it was also very cleverly written, and not long patches of it either.
It's because you love Dexter.
Right.
I mean, think about it.
You do.
There's just like we loved Walter White. You know, this guy, Walter White. I mean, he became, you know, the old Vince Gilligan said, you know, Breaking Bad is a story of Mr. Chips who becomes Scarface, and that's true. And yet, fans hated Skyler, not Walter. You know, and with Dexter, he does the most horrific things, although he always says it's for a greater good.
Right.
So, you know, he's like,
he has a code.
Yeah, he has the code. His father gave him the code, and, you know, he is just applying frontier justice in his own way. And I don't think it's coincidental that the Dexter series was based on Dexter novels.
Yeah.
Where the writer fleshed out the character brilliantly, and then the adapter had a rich pool of character traits and real depth to plumb for the TV version.
You know, I didn't read the books, but I mean, it didn't end the same way that the TV series ended, did it?
No.
Okay, because that TV. I'm not gonna give away the ending, but man, it was like, what?
You know something? I gotta tell you, I own the series. I love it, and the last episode, spoiler alert, he becomes a lumberjack. You know, I mean, it's too funny, but to me it worked. I mean, I just loved the character in the show so much that even when it got ridiculous, I yeah, okay, all right, I'll buy that. You know,
I thought it was supposed to be a comedy at that point. I'm like, what are we talking about here? What, he's a lumberjack now?
There were some comedic elements that you just kind of, if you really were evaluating it, you know, you'd say, oh, come on. Matter of fact, my brother and I were talking about the series Shameless on Showtime. You know that series with, what's his name? Edie Falco's wife. Not Edie Falco. You guys know who I mean. The woman in Fargo. What's his name? I can't. William Macy. William H. Macy.
Bill Macy.
Bill Macy. And we were talking about Shameless on Showtime, and he loves it. And, you know, I like it. But I said to him I said, come on, isn't it sometimes just completely ridiculous? He goes, yeah, it is. I mean, that family does things, and, you know, that it's just utterly ridiculous sometimes, and yet we love it. We watch it. Oh boy, yeah, that's great. You know, so you know, artistically, it takes all kinds, and people, you know, a lot of people who enjoy, you know, especially video entertainment, TV, movies, etc. They don't, you know, deconstruct all this stuff when they watch it. They'll let it wash over them, and, you know, if it's flawed, it's our job as media critics and writers to comment on, oh, you know, the ending where he becomes a lumberjack, that was a little far-fetched, you know, considering it established throughout the series. But, you know, it kind of worked for me because I just love the show, you know, so.
Yeah, I can see that. I mean, average viewers, when they talk about it, be like, they might joke around about it, but they're not really going to analyze it or really critique it.
Well, you know, I mean, it's like The Sopranos, you know. I mean,
interesting.
I had no problem with the ending. I mean, I've written a book about The Sopranos. I love the show.
It gave them an opening to do something more with it, if they ever could.
It gave, well, if Gandolfini had lived.
Well, that too.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a big one. But the thing is, I think he lived. I don't think that the end of the series was him getting shot. I just don't believe that, and I'll tell you why. This has been my theory for a while.
Okay.
You tell me if it's completely insane, okay?
Okay.
But after the show ended, LeBron was being courted to play for the Knicks.
Mm-hmm.
You know that.
Mm-hmm.
During that period, James Gandolfini and Edie Falco made a short film begging LeBron or asking LeBron to move to New York and play for the Knicks.
Mm-hmm.
They did it in character as Tony Soprano and Carmela Soprano. And in this film, they said that Tony was in witness protection and he had a beard. Now, the thing is, you can't make a film like that without
permission.
Thank you. So, can we consider that film, which has never been made public, part of the Sopranos canon? Well, I choose to.
I think you could. You can make the argument. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, why not?
I choose to, and I think that that is what happened to Tony after the last scene of the show when he left in Holston's in the restaurant. Later on, he did not agree. He agreed to flip, which, you know, character-wise, I don't know. The only way I think he would do, he refused to do it in season 1, but the only way he would do it at the end of the series is if his family was threatened. And if they were saying, you know, Carmela and the kids, they're going to have lifelong problems because we're going to do this, we're going to do that. That to me might be logical motivation for him to say, I'll go into witness protection.
I mean, I thought that would be the whole point of the series, right? He was like the psychopath. He was a mob boss, but the one thing he did care for his family. I mean, even though, he had that connection with his family, even though he cheated and all the other stuff, but
that was his primary focus in life, his big love, his motivation. And you know, it's funny, he said that. There were many times throughout the series where he said, everything I do for you and your mother and your brother, especially to Meadow, when he was talking to Meadow. And you just realize how important his family was. So he may, you know, it was believable to me that he would become a witness and would go into witness protection, and that this short film was part of the canon. So I've always believed that Tony lived. And yet there are deconstructions on the internet, pages and pages and pages, looking at every little scene in the finale, proving he was killed. So, but
I think you're right. I think you're right. I think he lived. I'll go with it. He lived.
Yeah.
Well, how could he make the short film if he died?
Yeah.
Well, that's it. And you know something? If you're David Chase and you own Tony Soprano and the Knicks come to you, or they don't come to you, and the Knicks are going to make a film using your characters, even if it's not for commercial use, that's not going to happen. So clearly Chase had to approve. And in fact, there's a new book out called The Sopranos Sessions, written by 2 New Jersey writers. One who has been written columns of reviews of the show. He works for a newspaper. And David Chase is being interviewed in the book. And at one point he says, well, you know, we originally had the death scene being Tony driving through the Lincoln Tunnel towards New York and the screen going dark and him not returning. And the reporter, the writer says, you do realize you just said death scene. Are you still there?
Yeah.
Okay. You just said death scene. And Chase was like totally silent for a while. And then he goes, fuck you guys. You tell me, what does that mean? What does that mean? You know, and the thing is, was it a Freudian slip? I mean, he didn't use that scene.
Yeah.
But the fact that it's described the final scene of the series, the potential final scene of the series, as a death scene,
Yeah.
that has made a lot of people believe that he thinks Tony died. But then you got the movie, the little movie, so clearly it's subjective, you know. I guess it's open to interpretation.
Here's my opinion. It's Schrodinger's cat.
Yeah, he's dead, he's alive,
yeah.
he's alive, he's dead, yeah. You know, and you know about the new movie coming out, right? The Many Saints of Newark. Have you heard about that?
I heard about that.
Prequel to The Sopranos. And Michael Gandolfini, James Gandolfini's son, is playing the young Tony Soprano.
No kidding.
And I'm going to tell you, I'll make a prediction now, whether or not it comes true. The day may come where Chase is willing to do a reboot of The Sopranos with Michael either playing Tony or playing someone else. But it wouldn't surprise me, because if Michael Gandolfini, he already looks like his father, but he's young, you know, he's still under 20. So if he becomes more and more and more physically like his father, it would be irresistible to do another Sopranos with him as Tony's long lost twin. Yeah, right. You know,
I mean,
this is
So,
Johnny.
So, talk a little bit about would you say that the Godfather movies were like the Godfathers of all the crime family films to come after? I mean, because it really set the tone of how, you know, the crime families worked, right?
Undeniably. Godfather and Goodfellas were huge influences on Chase and on mob and crime movies after they came out. In fact, it's very meta. You know, the characters in The Sopranos talk about the Godfather movies.
Yeah,
and
that's
they
true.
And the priest asks Carmela, you know, which is Tony's favorite, and Carmela says, "Oh, the second one, when he goes to Sicily," and the priest says, "What does Tony think about Goodfellas?" And I mean, it is just so blatant. And the thing is, if you watch Goodfellas now, there are set moments and segments that were not duplicated in The Sopranos, but clearly inspired The Sopranos. The hijacking of the trucks and a whole bunch of other things that, upon rewatching Goodfellas, you'll recognize that Chase was nodding to both Goodfellas and The Godfather. So yeah, to answer your question, I think so. I think there were huge influences on The Sopranos and everything that followed. Donnie Brasco. Yeah. That was clearly influenced by both Sopranos and Goodfellas, you know, and that came later. Once Upon a Time in America, The Departed, even another Scorsese movie. You know, they I don't think they would have been. I'm not saying they wouldn't have gotten made, but I don't think they would have been the same if there weren't the Godfather and Goodfellas movies. Those are the documents of crime video. I think. Yeah.
I don't think Godfather would get made today.
That's another issue. Yeah, you're right.
I mean, if you look at that first movie, and the inciting incident happens like 80 minutes into the movie.
Yeah, I know. It was. See, that's the thing. You know, the thing is, you got to know when you can break the rules, and you got to know how to break them.
Yeah.
And clearly, Mario Puzo and Francis Ford Coppola knew how to break the rules narratively.
Yeah.
Right.
So they didn't. Oh well, can you imagine some young producer getting the Godfather script and saying, "Well, the inciting incident isn't on page 3. You
Right.
got the wedding. The wedding is going. You gotta move to the and just them laughing at him. I mean, it's a so yeah. There are rules, but you got to know when to break them, when you can break them, and how to break them. And the best movies always seem to be in violation of certain unbreakable traditions in film, and then they're heralded as groundbreaking.
You have a point about that. You do. You have a point about that. If I think about all the movies that are like very significant, at least culturally, sort of groundbreaking thing. Well, think about Pulp Fiction, the Matrix, just different things.
Yeah, well, Quentin Tarantino is such a buff, a film buff. I mean, this guy's a walking encyclopedia of movies, and so he borrowed, but really was inspired by, and then put in his own. I mean, Reservoir Dogs. I mean, it's think about Reservoir Dogs. I mean, for the 90, 100 minutes that it is, 80% of it is dialogue.
Yeah.
There are some action scenes, but they're a tiny percentage. The bulk of it is in that warehouse,
Right.
with what's his name bleeding to death on the ramp, and
Right.
that was unimaginable.
Tim Roth.
Tim Roth, exactly right. That you wouldn't have action scenes repeatedly. Oh no, there's a lot of talking, but then again, that's Quentin Tarantino.
Another thing too, I think about another action film that kind of broke rules in some way. Like I'm thinking of Die Hard. Because Die Hard, there's a lot of exposition, but it's kind of like the character talking to himself. Like he's doing a lot of talking to himself. Like who does
he's
that?
alone, right?
Yeah, he's alone. Who else he's gonna be talking to? But who does that really? But I mean, it's kind of interesting. I don't know. It's just.
It's funny you mention that because, first of all, Die Hard is a Christmas movie.
Hey, thank you.
It is.
It is. It absolutely is.
And I think it was
And
voted number one on the show, by the way. Voted number one Christmas movie on the Dead Stone podcast. It happened. Yeah.
Everyone's right. And that script is taught in screenwriting schools. And there's a website that looks at every scene and explains the forward movement of the script and why this was different and why it was perfect. And so, yeah, that's a brilliant screenplay, Die Hard. And, it's become, do any of you guys watch Billions?
Billions.
No.
On Showtime with, about the hedge guy with Paul Giamatti. And, it's brilliant.
Okay.
It's absolutely brilliant.
Sounds like something I'd like.
Oh, you would absolutely love it. It's one of the best new series. It's in its third season ended. Fourth season starts on March 17th. I'm writing a review of it for the local paper. And
tell me again what it's called.
Billions. Okay.
Billions. And in fact, it has there's a character named Taylor Mason in Billions, and she starts as an intern at Axe Capital, run by Damian Lewis, who is Bobby Axelrod, and she's bald, and she wears a shirt and tie, and her first scene when she walks in to meet Bobby, the head of the company, the CEO of the company, she says, "Hello, my name is Taylor. My pronouns are they, theirs, and them."
Okay.
And throughout the show, whenever they refer to Taylor, anyone refers to Taylor, they refer to him or her as they. And talk about groundbreaking.
Yeah.
This has got so much attention because the actress is actually kind of like non-binary. Asia Taylor Dillon. She was on Orange is the
Orange is the New Black.
New Black, yeah.
Orange is the New Black. She was on that, Asia Taylor Dillon, and then she came and she defines herself as non-binary, and they built it into the script, and it's a matter of fact, it's written by David Levine and his partner. They wrote Ocean's 13. They wrote Rounders. Remember that movie with the poker movie? They wrote that, and now they created and wrote this series, and it immediately jumped into my top 5 in terms of dramatic TV series. I think
I
you guys
definitely have to watch this.
You would love it. I mean, it's irresistible. It's irresistible. Axe Capital. He is the only guy who survived 9/11 from his company. His company's hedge firm. Everyone was in the office but him, and everyone died but him. And he started up Axe Capital with what was left and money and and so forth. And now he personally, the main character, is worth $11 billion, and all they do all day is make money, sell stocks, buy stocks, and yet it's written with consultation from real hedge fund guys. So it's a little technical, but it's really easy to understand.
Okay.
And I can't praise it enough. I mean, it's absolutely terrific.
And Damian Lewis was fantastic in Band of Brothers.
He was also tremendous. Did you ever see the series Life?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
That's him. Yeah. There were 2 seasons of Life, and he was a prisoner who got his detective job back, and he was great in there with, again, an American accent.
Right.
That's what kills me. In Billions, he's got an American accent, and then on the DVDs and the special features when they interview him, he's got this really thick British accent, and he turns it on and off. I mean, it's fascinating. It's terrific.
That stuff is good, man. It baffles me how they're able to do that, but it's just okay. I didn't even realize that there's an American accent, but okay,
Yeah, he's really good, really good. Paul Giamatti is in it. He's kind of his nemesis. He's the attorney for the Southern District of New York, and he wants to get Axe because he believes that there's insider trading going on and so forth. And the guy who played Gale in Breaking Bad, I can't remember his name. He's Damian Lewis's right-hand man. And Maggie Skiff, she is the on-site promotion coach for these guys. I mean, Maggie Siff, sorry. She was in Mad Men, she was in Walking Dead, and she is married to Paul Giamatti. So you want to talk about conflict of interest? Her husband is going after her boss, and her job is to keep everybody stable and sane in the company as her own family is attacking them. Yeah. So it's a great setup. It really is. You'd really like it.
Yes. Now we are coming towards the end. We are kind of like overtime, but I will say this. Because you have a bunch of stuff that you wrote about, and one thing that fascinates me a little bit, I say a little bit now, but it used to fascinate me a lot younger, was UFOs, the possibility of UFOs. And you've written, there's a book you have about some facts about UFOs.
Yes, I've written 2 books about UFOs, one called the UFO Book of Lists, and a new one coming out in March called the Big Book of UFO Facts, Figures, and Truth, which I co-wrote. Well, actually, he contributed. The guy who hosts UFO Hunters on the Discovery Channel. Okay. Bill Burns. He contributed 5 or 6 articles, essays for the new version of the book. Okay. So yes, the thing with UFOs. Now, I personally have had a sighting.
What?
Yeah, I was driving on Route 1 in East Haven. And it was 9:45 a.m. on a Monday morning. It was sunny. And I was stopped at a light, and I looked up into the sky, and I saw a silver oval shape moving from south to north. And we are right near Tweed New Haven Airport. Okay. So I said, oh, it's a jet. Okay.
Okay.
But then as I'm staring at this thing and I'm watching it, it moves across my field of vision. It
Okay.
stops. It stops,
All right.
backs up, and winks out. And then the light turned green. And I continued on. And I, to this day, it qualifies. UFO means unidentified flying
I don't know
object.
what it was.
And I don't know what that was. Was it my eyes playing tricks? Was it a legitimate extraterrestrial sighting? I don't know. But the book has sightings that will blow your mind, because what I did was, you've all heard of Project Blue Book, right? There's a new series coming out called Project Blue Book.
Project
In
Blue Book.
1940
Yeah.
1947 to 1970, the United States government investigated every UFO sighting that had been reported to the government. And they were able to rule out like a massive number, like of 12,600 sightings, they were able to explain like 12,000 of them. And there were like 618 left.
Okay.
And of the 600 that they said, we can't explain these. And of those 6 astronauts, jet pilots, judges, etc., and wrote all about them in the book and reported what they saw. I mean, for a jet pilot, incredibly well trained, of course, to say an object flew around the nose cone of his jet at 1,500 miles an hour and then flew off at an insane speed up into the atmosphere. My point in the introduction,
Dude,
to
that was so
section
freaky. Can you imagine being?
there's 200 of those in the book. I mean, if you and with names, locations, dates, and times and duration of the sighting. And the point I make in the introduction to that chapter is, if these people told you anything else, their credibility would be so high you would believe them. But if they say they saw something weird, you are to dismiss them, which a lot of people will do and say, oh, UFOs aren't real.
Yeah.
There's nothing going on. Now, let's face it, a lot of it might be government crafts. It might be secret government crafts, but there's an awful lot that even with modern technology, crafts can't do, that is being reported by people whom you would believe in any other situation in life.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the Project Blue Book chapter of the book. And then I have a section on astronaut UFO sightings, which are very played down by NASA and the government. A section on Area 51 and Roswell and abduction. It's a really, really interesting look at a phenomenon that so many people have seen things and reported them, and so many of them are believable. They're not. I mean, a judge, a doctor. These people report this because, do you know Jimmy Carter? In fact, I have it in the book. Jimmy Carter saw a UFO and actually and he filed a report. I have Jimmy Carter's UFO sighting report in the book.
Damn, I gotta check this book out.
Maybe he only saw it in his heart.
Well, he had like 16 people with him who also saw it in his heart. Maybe. But I know what you mean. But no, he described it, this big round object that changed colors and floated up into the sky, and people were with him, and it was inexplicable to him. So he reported it, and Ronald Reagan reported a UFO sighting before he became president. He was on a plane, and he and the pilot both saw something.
Whoa!
And the pilot, to go after it. and the pilot said, "I'm sorry, I can't." But yeah, he reported when they landed. And what a lot of these sightings have in common is that they report craft like stopping in midair and then flying off into the sky at an insane speed. That's a common trait
Mhm.
of a great many of these sightings. So the thing is, can everyone for the last 1,000 years be wrong?
Yes.
Okay, all right, that's fine. If that's your position, that's fine too. But you got to explain to me how you write off.
No, I don't actually have a position on UFOs.
Mhm.
You know, I don't have enough information.
Well, the thing is, again, it all comes down to credibility. When someone tells me something, I always consider the source, and I always
Yeah,
want
that's important.
and believe it or not, credibility to me is kind of a form of evidence. I mean, again, if a radar operator they've spent, or even a jet pilot, flying for the Air Force, how much have we spent training him, right? And then he's just going to make up something.
And so people understand, they're not just trained to fly, they're also trained to spot and identify other aircraft.
Thank you.
Mhm.
As soon as possible.
Their observation skills are mind-boggling. So yeah, you're right. So are we to just say, oh, well, you've had this stellar career. Your reviews have been just wonderful, and yet you're making this up or delusional about this one thing.
Yeah.
Because reporting something like that is not good for your career.
Yeah.
So they had to have really believed that it was important to report something that they knew could do damage to their reputation. And that takes quite a kind of noble sense of integrity
Yeah.
to say, listen, you may not like what you're hearing, but this is what happened to me.
I like
And
that.
I'm going to be honest about it, you know?
Well, that
And
actually
Weren't there
helps me
not
out.
reports? Weren't there also reports during World War II?
Oh, there have been reports since the medieval times. In fact, I've written a book about crop circles, and I've got reports from the 1600s of a crop demon that created patterns in the crops in the middle of the night. 1647, there's a record of this happening. So, yeah, UFO sightings, crop formations, a lot of weird paranormal stuff has been happening for eons. And, the thing is, because it seems irrational, a lot of people will just tend to dismiss it. But, there's a lot that we don't see that goes on, and there's a lot that we don't know.
Yeah.
I wrote a book called The Weird 100 like 10 years ago, and it's like an A to Z. It starts alien abductions and it ends with zombies, and it covers pretty much a lot can be dismissed. In fact, my crop circle book, I worked with Colin Andrews, who is the world's leading authority on crop formations, and he has concluded 80% of all crop formations are hoaxes, are man-made. The other 20% scientifically cannot be explained because the joints, the elbows of the crops explode. They're swollen as though they've been put through a microwave. The hoax formations, the stalks
They're just bent over.
No, they're broken.
Oh, they're broken.
They're actually broken. The ones that are unexplainable, the elbows of the crop are larger, 2, 3, 4 times normal size, and then pushed down as though they were microwaved. If you put a corn stalk in a microwave, the fluid in the elbow and the joint is going to make it swell.
Yeah.
But they're not broken. The thing is, with the 20% of formations, the crops are still alive. With the hoax formations, they're dead. They're killed.
Now,
they're crushed with a board.
The other question I have is this the work of extraterrestrials or China or North Korea trying to I don't know,
North Korea.
come over and do some sort of crazy off?
Come on.
Or maybe
Jesse,
some.
how much have you had to drink?
Not enough. Not enough.
Not enough, right?
But
yeah.
maybe
North Korea, they're the ones with the top technology.
it'd be China. It'd be China.
And they're responsible for the UFO sightings, and yeah, right. No, the thing is, believe it or not, a lot of the real knowledgeable people about stuff which seems to be extraterrestrial or paranormal, a lot of them believe that there are Earth explanations that we just don't understand. Like the crop circle people believe that there's some type of magnetic fields that have yet to be identified that can somehow affect these crops. And we don't know everything. We haven't discovered everything. We can't explain everything. So, a lot of the more sober-minded experts and scientists have said, just because we can't explain it and the notebooks are swollen doesn't mean it's aliens. It could simply be something beneath the surface that we have not yet identified, so.
Could be.
Took us a while to identify gravity, right? And yet
I think it's SK. Let's blame SK for it all.
SK did it. SK did it.
That's why I'm so tired all the time.
Yeah.
Just going around doing crop circles. Doing crop circles, man. Man.
I love King's science fiction. That's the thing. He doesn't do enough of it to me, for my taste, but I love sci-fi stuff. Yeah. 11/22/63.
Yeah.
That's a time travel novel, which is terrific. The Jaunt in Skeleton Crew. I mean, that's the Star Trek transporter. I mean, he's been writing excellent science fiction for a long time. But he's always pegged, he's a horror writer. He's only a horror writer, Oh, no. No, he's not. He's much more than that.
Okay. Now we are over time here. Mr.
And it went fast.
Yeah, Mr. Spignesi. Steve. Okay.
Yes.
I'll call you Steve. Steve, man, it was great having you on the show.
This is great. You guys are terrific to talk to. Yeah, you guys ask good questions, and
we love it.
Yeah, you're interested in a lot of this stuff that I write about. So yeah, I'd be happy to. It'd be my pleasure.
Yeah, with a guest like this, I like to pick their brain about all the topics that they cover, right? And see, okay, man, this, that. Okay, man, next time you come on, I guarantee you we're going to go down a rabbit hole on one of these subjects and go deep.
Yeah.
Next time.
Well, yeah, we could talk about Stephen King next time. I mean, in depth. I mean, I got a lot to say about him and his stuff, and a lot of stuff I covered in the new book that is being pretty well received, but the funny thing is, I've been preaching that King is a more important writer than the public perceives him to be since 1987.
Wow.
And that was when, I read 10 years prior, I had read The Shining, and I read The Shining in like 2 days. And I looked at this book and I said, who is this guy? And then I find out he wrote it in his 20s. And I said, this is unbelievable. This is one of the great, matter of fact, Peter Straub calls it the greatest haunted house horror novel of American literature.
Yeah.
And and there are books written about The Shining. Books about a book,
Books about a book.
Yeah, and that's unheard of. It's very rare that you have entire books devoted to one novel. And yet there are books out there that are written about only The Shining because it is one of the most brilliant novels he's ever written. And so now it seems like popular culture, the world of literature, academia, and the media are coming around to the fact that King writes literature. He's not a hack. He won the National Book Award. He won the National Medal of Art. He won the O. Henry Award for Best Short Story. He is, horror writers don't win the National Medal of Art for their contribution to American letters. And yet King did. And it wasn't just hype. It was warranted.
Yeah.
By the way, there's something else that Stephen King does that a lot of people aren't aware of. And he has a standing policy that any film student
dollar babies.
can take any of his material and use it for a student project without paying him any royalties.
Well,
as long as it's not done for commercial purposes.
Yeah, what you're describing is the dollar baby process, meaning that you can write to King and ask to make a film of one of his short stories, not the novels, one of his short stories, for $1. You gotta pay the dollar.
Oh, you gotta pay the dollar. Okay.
You gotta pay, and he cashes it. He cashes the check. And the agreement that these filmmakers sign is that King gets a copy. It cannot be released commercially. It can be shown at festivals with permission, cannot be posted on the internet, and it cannot be sold commercially unless it's so incredible that King then allows it to go to the next level, which is what happened with The Woman in the Room, which was Frank Darabont's first film and was a dollar baby.
Look at that.
And King watched it and said, and Frank wanted to release it on DVD. He wanted to show it, and he allowed it because it was just so incredible. And the thing is, so many of his short stories have been adapted that now he has a list on his website, stephenking.com, of stories that have not been optioned for, production either commercially or as a dollar baby. And the list isn't that long. And frankly, I think it needs to be updated probably because now I'm hearing more and more filmmakers are making short films based on short stories that had not been done before. So, yeah, you're absolutely right. And doesn't that speak to his belief in the artistic process and
absolutely? I mean, it's
supporting young filmmakers.
It
does.
I've never heard of anybody doing anything even close to that.
For a buck.
For a buck.
And the dollar, he's joked about that in interviews where he will sign that, he will endorse that check and cash it. And, I know some dollar baby filmmakers, they will frame
right
the cancel check because it's got Stephen King's signature
on it.
And he watches every one of them, and he has commented about a great many of them. One of the earliest ones was The Last Rung on the Ladder by a friend of mine, Jim Cole. He's in my King Encyclopedia talking about it. And he liked that when he mentioned that in the Shawshank Redemption script book. And there's many others. I taught one of them, All That You Love Will Be Carried Away by James Renner, who's a writer. He made All That You Love Will Be Carried Away with Joe Bob Briggs was in it.
Yeah, no kidding.
Yeah,
I used to love reading his column.
And actually, the guy who did that comic book where he's a hospital clerk, and he wrote about his own life and then getting cancer, and he always fought with David Letterman when he was on his show. Not Artie. You guys know who I mean, right? He's a weird-looking guy.
Which one?
Yeah, him. He's in it. He's in All That You Love Carried Away. And so it. Some of them he really likes, and they do a real good job with them, and they end up being shown commercially, and he watches all of them, and I think he enjoys it. The idea that people are making short adaptations, because some of them he's sold dollar baby rights more than once. The couple short stories where there's different versions of the dollar babies, and he'll like one and more than another, and so it's
a very generous thing.
Thank you.
It is.
Yeah,
it is.
Really is. I mean, you don't hear about that being offered to anybody, and you just write his office and say, I'd like to make a dollar baby film of whatever, the New York Times at bargain rates, or The Things They Left Behind, or one of the short stories. And his lawyer, I hear that his lawyer has an agreement that you draft, and that they draft, and it's quite. In fact, there's an entire book written about the dollar babies. Yeah, and I understand there's a convention
No kidding.
this
A Dollar
year.
Baby convention? Oh man.
Yeah,
Oh man.
gonna
Okay.
That
show
would be fun.
All right.
Well, the thing is, I'm still not clear as to whether they're just going to have the Dollar Baby filmmakers and have a panel discussion and answer questions, or if they were being allowed to show the films. The moderator, the director of the event, wrote me and was telling me about it and who's involved in it. But
Gotcha.
I'm still. It's my fault. I didn't understand whether they're going to show these movies or if they're just going to have a discussion and a signing and so forth.
Man,
and
you'd kind of hope they'd show them, for heaven's sakes.
you would.
I mean,
You would.
yeah, you would think so. Man, Steven, we got to get you back on to talk about this in more depth. We got to go down these rabbit holes, go deep. I guarantee we'll give you all the time. Oh man,
Thank you.
this has been
That's
a great show. A great show. You're
has.
so informed, so
Sure.
knowledgeable.
Thank
Oh man, ladies, gentlemen, if you made it this far, please press that thumbs up button. Please subscribe. Lonesome.
Tell all your friends.
Yeah. Tell your friends about
to
this.
tell their friends.
Look, the Dead and Stone podcast is live every Monday, Wednesday, Friday night. We have Game and Chill, which is me playing video games, Tuesday nights and Saturday nights.
And
we
making
got
comments in the comment section
SK
while
has
you play.
SK has Real Monsters, which is a great show. Needs a lot more viewers. Thursday nights, and we're talking about serial killers. He talks about serial killers. It's like if you like the true crime stuff, you like the stuff you see on Netflix. It's like that, but actually, I think it's a little bit more in depth, and you show
The real bumps in the night.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Okay.
and
That sounds great.
so I was just reminding people of that, guys. You made it this far. Show us your support, give us some love, and y'all take it easy.
Good night.
Bye.
Great. Thanks,